Okay. All right. So we're recording. So we're going to get started with the questions. Christiane, again, I'm so appreciative that you're doing this. So the two research questions that I'm trying to answer, all of the questions I'm going to be asking you will go back to these research questions. So the first one is, how do novice elementary educators describe the role of spontaneous decision-making to influence their instructional practice? And then the second one is, how do novice educators describe the role of conscious decision-making to influence their instructional practice? So all of those questions, I will compile the data and try to answer those two questions from all the aggregate data. So from all the interviews, I'll try to answer those two questions. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So the first four questions are centered around just general decision-making. And the first question is, what skills and attributes do you feel are important when it comes to making effective classroom decisions?
Okay, what skills you said?
Yes, what skills and attributes?
Okay, will you say it one more time? I'm sorry, my computer asked me something about the camera and
Sure.
I just lost track.
Yeah, absolutely. What skills and attributes do you feel are important when it comes to making effective classroom decisions?
I think organization and flexibility are two of the biggest attributes. I think when you have a plan set out, and not only just a plan, but you've also incorporated like differentiated assignments and things to do. When there's an organized plan, you know your students, that helps you feel more confident in your planning and what you're doing in the classroom. But also along with that is being flexible and being willing to change what you have set, because as you know, working with kids, you can never truly plan what all you're going to do. There may be some higher order thinking that comes in, or you may need to take a step back and review what you're doing. So I think my two main attributes when it comes to planning for the classroom and being prepared, it would be organization and flexibility. They kind of just go hand in hand together.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, the second question. What process do you use to make sure your instructional decision-making process is correct? And can you give me specific work example?
Okay, so the district gives us pacing guides and curriculum that we are to use. So the pacing guides help me stay on track with where I'm supposed to be according to the district, according to the state and the standards, so that I can get the rest of it done. And I think one thing that helps me stay on track and know that I'm doing the right thing is being in communication with the instructional facilitator, and then as well as our team, and making sure that our goals are aligned for our students, our objectives, our lesson planning, even though they may look a little bit different in the classroom, just ensuring that as a team and as a school, we're staying on the same page. And with that just comes communicating with other professionals in the school setting.
So talking about your team, do you have set a time planning the same plan time?
Yes, we have our plan every day from 1 to 1:50. Now as a team, we plan weekly on Thursdays. So we set the plans up for the next week, and then we will create our lesson plans. So we have a Google Drive that our whole team is a part of. That's where we put our resources, anything that we buy on TPT. Put that there, and then of course we have a document with our lesson plans that we all have access to, and we each take a subject and we plan for each week. That takes the load off our back, and then that helps us kind of stay on the same page as well.
And how has that process helped you as a novice teacher?
It has helped tremendously. Not only giving me the confidence that I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing because there are other people there, but it also gives me like the teamwork makes me feel like, okay, I'm a part of this. Even though I am a new teacher, nonetheless, I am a teacher and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then it also holds me accountable to ensuring that I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. My kids are where I'm supposed to be doing. and allows me time to ask questions. When I started, I was on a team with teachers that have been teaching from anywhere from 8 to 10 years. And this year there's one teacher, she's been teaching for 8 years. This is my 5th year at JL at 4.5. And then I've got one that's a 2nd year teacher and one that's a 3rd year teacher. So we're all kind of new. So that's been kind of nice to bounce ideas off of each other and just be there to support each other as well. But also being able to use the knowledge that I gained from those teachers that I worked with last year that had been in 1st grade for all these years, being able to use that knowledge to kind of encourage these newer teachers that I'm working with this year.
That's awesome. So, okay. So here's an interesting question. Describe a time you made an unpopular decision at school. How did you handle the feedback? And how would you handle it differently?
Okay, so this is very silly. This is something to do not even really with academics, but something like recess, when it's raining outside or not raining, or a teacher doesn't want to go because it may rain and not. And as a natural born leader, there are some times where I will suggest, but I won't. As a partner, I'm not going to tell people what to do, how to do their job, but I will suggest, hey, but there are some people that like to be told very bluntly, if you want me to do something, tell me. And so that's just not in my nature though. And so learning but this could go with curriculum, it could go any way, but I would handle it differently by, instead of just beating around the bush with suggesting when it comes to curriculum or it comes to recess or anything, just being straightforward and getting what needs to be done. I did the same thing with the curriculum. Something wasn't working out, but the district had set the pacing guide for us. They told us what we needed to do. I did not feel like it was benefiting our students to ignore some of the curriculum that we did have in our hands. And so I asked if we could focus on that. The answer was no. I was completely shot down. And I just took that. Well, there were ways that I could take that no, and I could still implement what I was wanting to do in my classroom without forgetting what I was supposed to be doing. So in the curriculum area, I would still seek out that guidance, seek out that mentorship. But at the end of the day, if it was something that I was told not to do, but I felt like it was best for the students, I would probably now go in and just try to fit it in wherever I can, which is hard now in 1st grade because they're wanting us to teach them calculus and all these things. So it's hard to find time. But if it's important to the students, making time where I can.
Very good. Okay. So after making a decision, what process do you use to reflect on the outcome?
So I don't really have a process. I do a lot of self-reflecting. I think a lot of us as teachers do that anyways. I have a person on my team who is more of a veteran teacher. She's the one, this is her 9th year. And she's someone that I can go to if I make a decision based off school, based off testing, based off curriculum, anything that I can go to and just kind of get a second opinion, like, hey, this is what I did. And like, do I need to make adjustments? Is this right? Can you give me any advice? So having that teammate, and there is someone else in 3rd grade too that I'm able to go to, and she's been teaching for 12 years. So I think really just finding those people in the school that you are comfortable with, that know you as a teacher, to help you work through some of the hard decisions that we have to make daily. And I have a pretty good relationship with my principals as well, my assistant principal in particular. So there are times when it is a very difficult decision to make pertaining to a child or testing or anything that's going on. I will reach out to the principals. I want to make sure, that I am doing everything that I can and I'm doing it the right way. So there are a lot of people, luckily I'm blessed to have those people to kind of guide me along the way.
Yes, you are. I agree with that because they make all the difference in the world for sure.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. Great job on those first 4 questions. The next questions 5 through 8, are really going to hone in on instructional practice. So let's talk about decisions you make in the classroom related to instruction. What type of decisions do you make in the classroom about instruction? And I'm going to give you, there are 3 subparts, and then I'll go back and read them individually.
Okay.
Tell me about some that you make often, like daily instructional decisions. Walk me through the process of making that decision. And do you make all instructional decisions this way? So just think about your instruction for just a minute. And let's start out. Tell me about some decisions that you make often in the classroom about instruction.
So I would say often would be, are the kids getting it? If they are not, spending more time choosing to either redo the whole lesson, either that day, the next day. Do I have time for this, or do I need to move on to the next thing? Do I just leave them confused before moving on to the next thing, or do I kind of clear this up before we move on? And that's like the main decision that I'm making constantly in small group, in whole group, throughout the day. I would say that's the biggest decision.
Okay, so walk me through the process of making a decision about whether or not they got it. How do you know? What are your thought processes in whether or not you move on or not? Talk me through that.
Okay, so we'll do, I do, we do, you do. So I'm able to see a lot of times when we're doing we do, whether they're getting it or not through questions, through their turn and talk, their pair shares with their partners, and just listening to their responses. Are they able to, I do have a few kids that are always going to get it. You're always going to have those 6 kids, but then there's going to be the other ones. And so really trying to focus on those ones that are not answering, that are kind of piggybacking off the ones that are. And that shows a lot when it comes time to think, pair, share. And when I think pair, share, I try to do it with kids that are on their level without the students really knowing. So that gives me a good understanding of, okay, these kids, I can tell that they're really not getting it, but I'm not sure. And then listening to them talk, I'm like, okay, they're either getting it or they're not. That helps me a lot. And then just informal assessments throughout the lesson. So we'll do like, we just got done doing whiteboard Wednesday. So we're learning the EE rule, and they'll write the words on their whiteboard. We'll segment, we'll blend, write. And so that helps me see a lot, but they're not being like, they don't feel like they're being singled out. It's something we're all doing, but it gives me a good understanding. Or if they're at their desk doing independent work, walking around before the lesson's over to see. Sometimes I'll catch it late because the math lesson is so fast, and I'll have their exit tickets, and I'm like, oh no, as I'm getting some of the exit tickets. And so when that's it, we'll all come back to the carpet and we'll review the lesson, and I'll say, okay, let's look at this exit ticket. Let's see. And a lot of times I've noticed that it's not so much that they don't understand it, it's that they freeze up when they get to themselves behind their privacy shields. And so just being able to support them and knowing whether it's emotional support that they need or academic support. And so kind of figuring that out too, because sometimes it's not always that they don't know it. It's just that they're a little afraid.
Yeah. So do you make all instructional decisions this way?
Yes, I would say in my classroom, I do. And now as far as like deciding what to teach, I'm told what I have to teach. Now, how I teach it is up to me, apparently. I hear different things. It's up to me, but also I have to use the curriculum. So it's kind of just a mix of both. It's a hybrid.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. So describe a time you made a difficult decision about instruction. What led you to the final decision?
So I can't say that I've ever really made a hard decision on my own. Our instructional facilitator at Julia Lee Moore is very involved with us as teachers and with us as planning. And so any difficult decision that I feel like I've had, I've been able to go to her and talk to her about and work through it. So I've never really felt like I individually have been able to. And I will say now that may be because I am a novice teacher and I don't want to step on toes and I'm still learning the system. So that may be why I seek out counsel more than other teachers. But I will say I use our instructional facilitator like an encyclopedia.
That's awesome. So can you share with me a decision that you've taken to her before and y'all kind of talked through it? Can you
Yeah. So we in first grade writing. So our writing curriculum has kind of changed for the last 3 years. And when they're fixing our curriculum, the instructional facilitators really reach out to us as teachers to find out what's best. And so the district had come up with a plan, and I didn't feel like it was very age developmentally appropriate for students in first grade. And so I went to her and I said, hey, this is what we're being asked to do. I completely respect that and I will try my best. However, these students where they're at on this level, I really feel like if we watered it down just a little bit and did what was developmentally appropriate for them, then I can get them to where I'm being asked to do. But I want to make sure that I'm still doing what is asked of me by the district, what is required for me as this job. So where can we meet in the middle? And so we found some like writing prompts and some things that we could do to work through it. We used Teacher Pay Teachers to find a curriculum that kind of matched with the district, but also met my students where they were at. And so it was, like I said earlier, just being flexible. Still doing what they're asking, but working our way up to it instead. And so that's super helpful. And that's not been the only time that she's helped me. That's typically what she's helping me with is, hey, this curriculum, I know I'm supposed to do it. My kids are struggling. I need a little bit of help. What am I able to do without stepping on anybody's toes?
Right. So do you feel like when you go to your instructional facilitator, do you feel like the outcome is more positive had you not gone to her?
I feel like that, and that may just be something that is personal. It makes me feel more confident in my decisions and more confident in that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing as a teacher specifically.
Yeah. So think about what if your relationship wasn't as solid with your instructional facilitator and you made a decision and the outcome wasn't what you expected. What would you do next? I would try. The outcome was not what I would expect, what I had expected. I am very good at having one arm. I've had to monitor and adjust my whole life. So just monitoring and adjusting. Okay, this didn't work out. This is where they need to be. How can I make this better? And just me being who I am, if it wasn't my instructional facilitator, I would seek out someone, because if I did not, I would feel crazy and then I would just question myself and overthink. And so if it wasn't her, it would be any other person. I mean, anybody who would listen to me, I would reach out. I would still make the decision, but I think I would still, if it was not her, I would find someone else. Not that I can't make my own decisions, Right.
but it's just being at a new school, being in a district, and my district is pretty particular about, what they require of us as teachers, which is good. It's a good district, but just not knowing the ropes makes me feel comfortable seeking out.
Perfect. So describe any changes you've noticed in your decision-making skill set around instruction since you started your teaching career.
Yes. So speaking of reaching out to all those people, I feel like within the first 2 years, I was leaning a lot on my teammates who had been teaching for a long time, who knew what they were doing. And I had lots of feelings of being inadequate, not knowing what was going on, and so I would lean more on them. Once after the first year, I would say the first day of school, I like cried because I was like, I don't know how to be a teacher. I don't know what to do. But those are all the feelings you have when you're put in a classroom right after graduation. And they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
good luck. But just working through that, and after that first year, realizing, okay, I am capable. I can be a teacher. I am a teacher. I worked hard to get here. And so just taking ownership of my profession, of who I am in the classroom and why I was placed here. Throughout the years, it's gotten easier and easier. And my principal always says, after you've been in a grade for 3 years, that 4th year is really sweet because you get there. And I'm starting to feel that. I'm starting to get more comfortable with the curriculum. It changes all the time, but I'm getting better at adjusting to the changes of the curriculum because I know it's never going to stop. I feel like now I'm able to kind of lead the newer teachers that are in here and kind of help give them that confidence that my teammates had given me in the previous years.
Very good. So you mentioned that first year being so difficult and there being tears and all that. So can you tell me more about what made it so stressful about you trying to make decisions about instruction and curriculum that first year?
I think, when you go to school to become a teacher, you learn about, a lot of social emotional skills, what you can do for those types of areas. But I didn't really learn how to look at curriculum, break it down, and understand it for what it was worth. Now, I knew standards and I knew how to break down standards, but I had never really seen I had never seen pacing guides. I had never heard of pacing guides. And so all of that is just so new. And then you got a pacing guide for math. You got one for social studies, science, writing, reading. You've got one for small groups, and you've got just all this information, and it just feels like a lot. And you're like, okay, but I don't even know how to do this when you're not thinking in the back of your head. I'm trained in RISE. That's the newest, the earliest reading curriculum that is being taught that some teachers don't even know. There are things that I knew coming into being a teacher that teachers that had been in the profession did not know, but I wasn't seeing that. I was only seeing the big scary stuff, that I hadn't known. And I did have a mentor, but I think sometimes if the mentor doesn't seek out the mentee or reach out so much, it's kind of uncomfortable to go towards in that first year. Now I'm like, I'll go to anyone. But in that first year, you feel like it's just you. And then that's not the case. I think we put a lot of the stress and the worry on ourselves. And we just need to breathe and just ask, because people want to help. People want to ask us. And I think people don't because they don't want to put more on novice teachers' plates.
Yeah.
And then novice teachers don't want to ask because they're like, I don't want to be the annoying new teacher. So it's a hard mix. So then you get more comfortable. And I think that first year, it's just filled with just self-doubt. I mean, when you have worked so hard to get to something, you get there and then it's not necessarily what you expected it to be as far as planning and everything. It just kind of throws you for a loop. But with good team, with good family, with good principals and instructional facilitators, I feel like you eventually get into that role. But that first year, and even that summer coming back to the second year, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot everything I did. I'm a new teacher again. And finally that third year, I was like, okay, I've got this. And then this year I'm like, all right, we're ready for the first day of school, but those first few years, you're just questioning, am I doing what's right? And then the focus on test scores is so high right now that it's like, okay, I know I'm doing what I'm right, but my test scores. And so it's just a lot to manage. And then, you're trying to worry about self-care and you're like, how do you even spell self-care? What is
Right.
that? It's just
Yeah.
a lot that
Yeah.
first year.
Absolutely. All right. Now, you've talked a lot about this next question, but I just want to open it up just in case you have anything else to say. Describe a time you sought help from others to make a decision on instruction and what was the outcome. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I will just say one of the things that I appreciate with my school is when we do RTI meetings, our counselors there, our assistant principal, all of the reading interventionists, the instructional facilitator, and everyone else from the team are all in there in the meetings. And so I really appreciate when I do take a student to RTI, being able to hear like their home life from the counselor, or things that she knows that may not be in the file, or hearing from their interventionist that had them in kindergarten, or their interventionist that has them now, and being able to collaborate as a team. I think that's something, one, that's very special, and two, that's very important to have. Not only to feel like you're supported, but to know that your child in your classroom, your student, is getting everything that they need, from emotional to academic, all in this room, and we're all brainstorming together to work for the betterment of the students.
That's awesome. So, okay, just 4 more questions. The next set of questions are around this concept of conscious and spontaneous decision making. So the first question is, based on decisions you shared, which ones do you typically make very quickly, and which ones do you spend more time thinking about?
So I would say the ones that I spend more time thinking about are my set lesson plans, my set decisions of what I'm going to do. As far as teaching, the spontaneous ones would be, they're not getting it, let me do something. Okay, they're going crazy, they're not going to be able to focus, let me do a brain break, let's stop, because there's no point in me going on if they're crazy. So I'm going to stop this lesson, I'm going to put on a Go Noodle, and we're going to dance it out and move on. And just little decisions like that, like, okay, we're rolling on the floor, let's move from the carpet to our desk. Little things like that are more spontaneous. Or I see a kid that's about to blow up. I have one that he has muscular dystrophy, and it messes with his emotional well-being, and so he'll blow up. And so watching him about to just his ticking, and realizing, okay, let me stop the lesson, let me focus on this, and have the kids go work a problem at their desk. So not only focusing on their academic needs in the classroom while I'm teaching, but also their emotional needs in the classroom while I'm teaching. And if I need to stop what I'm doing to handle that and just focus on them for a second, or if I can keep going. Those would be the small decisions that I make every 5 minutes, it feels like.
Yeah, you mentioned your lesson, your specific lesson plans, and that's where you spend a significant amount of time. Why do you feel like you spend more time thinking about that versus thinking about, did they get it, did they not get it? We need to do a brain break. Why do you spend so much time on planning?
I think because of the pressure that is put on us as teachers, not only to get our kids to where they need to be for first grade, but also getting them to their goal that this computer has made up for their MWEA scores. And it's pushed down our throats so much to where teaching is not good enough. You got to teach, but you've also got to bleed, you've got to cry, you've got to do it all to get these kids where they need to be on this test. And if they're not, then you fail as a teacher. Now, this is not what's being said, but this is how the pressure makes us feel. And I've been talking to a lot of teachers in the school, some that have been here for 38 years, some that were going to continue going, but have decided to step aside because of the focus on testing. And I think that the reason I focus on that is solely because I know what I'm doing for them is good, but I want it to show on paper too. And I feel like if it doesn't show, then I have failed. And I know that that's not true, and I'm working through that this year. But just the pressure is not only being put on by the district, but by the state as well. And it's hard when people are in your classroom to see, okay, they're not on first grade level, but they can even spell their name when they came in. And look, they're writing "the cat is on the mat" when they're leaving, and that is big. They're probably never going to be on grade level for the rest of their life, but they're still capable of growing. And so I've just got to remind myself that, and not focus on what everybody else is focusing on. But I think that that's the main reason why I focus so hard on my lesson plans and wanting to get it right versus the other spontaneous. decision making.
Very good. So talking about spontaneous decision making, let's talk about those decisions that you make quickly. Why do you feel like you're able to make those decisions so quickly? You mentioned, taking a brain break or on the fly figuring out whether they're getting it or not. So talk me through that process.
I would say the most important part to really being able to do that is understanding your students and knowing your students. I think a lot of times they won't show that they're not getting it. They won't show that they're not paying attention, but if you know your students on a personal level, you'll know whether they're getting it or not. You'll know whether they're really paying attention or not. And so really just building that personal relationship with the students, getting to know them when you have them in that small group, reading group. I feel like that makes it really easy. Also, being a big sister to 6 siblings, I just had to think on the fly and had to put out little fires everywhere. And I feel like nowadays kids they're becoming less attentive for longer periods of time. So we're having to think on the fly. We're having to be fast. And so just keeping in mind too, that they're 6 years old and we're asking them to do a lot. And so being mindful of that, and just, I think the most important thing is understanding your students allows you to be better at that spontaneous decision making.
Good. So what makes something a quick decision for you?
Like in what aspect do you mean?
Well, even just like brain break, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier. What would you consider? What's the criteria, I guess, for a quick decision?
I don't think that I even think about it because it's such a quick decision. I just see it and I act on it. So, I've got a wild class this year. So if one kid's rolling on the floor, I've got about 4 others rolling on the floor. And in the time that I have turned around to grab their sheets that I am about to pass out, I turn back around and I've got just a zoo. Now there are times where the decision is not to do a brain break. It's to show them that, we need to focus and you have rules in this classroom that need to be followed, and still letting them know, just because you're acting crazy doesn't mean you're going to get to do something fun. You need to be respectful, and I guess kind of understanding too, when you're making those decisions, okay, is this a time that they need to talking or is this time to play? And I don't necessarily have a process that I think through that. I think, like I said, having been a big sister of 6 kids and I've worked with kids since I was 15, it just comes naturally. Okay, this is just, I need to just do this. I don't necessarily consciously think about it.
Good. Okay. So let's go back for just a minute about those decisions you spend more time on. You spoke a little bit earlier about, getting to know your kids. So basically go slow to go fast is what it sounded like. So in doing that, what resources do you draw from to get to know your kids so that you're able to make those spontaneous decisions?
So I think a lot of times just listening to them, talking to them, looking at the books that they read, the clothes that they wear, the boys will wear basketball or football stuff, or someone will be more into dinosaurs, someone will be more into books, like seeing how they treat their books, how they treat their stuff. And then through conversation, I talk to my kids a lot. We talk in small group, just being open. And, while I'm doing attendance, some of them are coming up. Hey, I had basketball practice last night. Hey, I had cheer practice. Hey, I did this. Hey, this weekend I went to Branson. So, you can hear a lot of stories if you actually are listening. Even if your responses are just, wow, that's cool. They'll tell you a lot. And then, doing the getting to know you. So we did one for the 120th day. That was like my best memories. We did one at the beginning that was tell me all about you. And so we'll do things like that throughout the year. But I think how I really get to know them is just watching them, listening to them, even talking to their parents, getting to know their parents and their home life. And then listening to the way that they interact with other kids as well gives me a very big picture of who that child is, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom too.
That's awesome. Building those relationships, so powerful.
Yes.
So, okay, so this next question has multiple parts. First of all, you have several viable options to make a decision in the classroom. How do you choose what to do? So, for example, maybe you've got 3 ideas on the way to teach a lesson. How do you decide which one of those options you're going to go with for your kids?
Typically, I try to get, so if I have 3 different ways that I could teach something, I try to choose the best way that will reach all of my students. So try not to go too high. I try not to go too low. I try to meet them in the middle. I know that I will still lose a few. So then I try to do easier questions throughout that lesson to make them feel accomplished so that they don't feel like they're getting left behind. And then also higher order thinking questions so that the kids that are understanding are not getting left behind, but staying in the middle for the complete lesson so that I am reaching all of the class versus one or the other.
Okay, very good.
So whichever way is best for my students.
Perfect. So the next part of that is you have limited viable options. Maybe it's a lesson that it's going to hit the lower performing students, or maybe it's a lesson that's only going to hit the higher performing students. So in that situation, how do you choose what path to follow?
So what I would do is I would just, if I have limited, I would teach it. If it was to the higher, I would just teach it. And then I would make up for any lost instruction in small group with the kids that did not get it. So if I needed to pull an extra small group, and let's say the math lesson was easier for that day and I felt like I didn't have to walk them through that lesson because we've done it for 4 days, it's the same stuff, let them go to their seats and work through it with a partner while I pull back this extra small group to go back over what they have missed. And typically, if the rest of the class is working on a math sheet that we have in our math, we typically do the same thing for 4 to 5 days. So then they'll just skip that lesson and I'll do a quick, easier one because they're not really getting it anyways if it's my low group. So I have to differentiate anyways. So then I'll teach that lesson still, but differentiating it to where it's not as long, so that we're not losing any instruction time. The other kids are still able to work. I'm able to pull these kids back, teach them on a level that makes more sense to them, but still give them the math lesson that they're missing while I'm pulling them back.
Perfect. I have one last question.
Okay.
What in your ed prep program, if anything, prepared you to make the gazillion decisions in the classroom that you have to make?
What specifically in the ed program?
And it's okay to be honest, so.
Yes, I mean, honestly, I don't feel like it really prepared us to make the decisions. Like I said, we did learn about a great stuff about how to teach kids to read, but that was kind of the extent of it. You know, we didn't learn about looking at curriculum, kind of dissecting that curriculum or other subjects outside of reading. I know Arkansas focuses a lot on reading for important reasons, but as going through the ed program, I didn't feel like it really prepared me to make those decisions or to feel confident as a teacher in the classroom, which is interesting, having had spent 3 semesters in the classroom before even getting to the classroom, which those were helpful. I think that helped prepare more for the decision making than the actual courses in the ed program themselves.
So what suggestions would you have for the ed prep programs to help you better, be prepared to make those decisions? I heard you mention dissecting the curriculum. Are there other suggestions you would have?
Yeah, I would say honestly, just kind of walking novice teachers through or students through, hey, this is what it looks like when you're planning, and this is what's beneficial to plan. You know, when we planned in college, we had to do those 21-page test lesson plans that were not very realistic, that were beneficial to understand why we were teaching what we were teaching. However, if we would have had, this is actually how a typical lesson plan goes, and this is the information that you're given. Here's some information. Let's do some mock lesson plans, and then walking through students with those lesson plans. Okay, so why did you choose to teach this? The pacing guide says this, and so walking through that and teaching teachers how to plan for their classroom, I think would be, and then with that comes better decision making because you feel confident in your ability to plan.
Such a great answer. So that's all the questions I have. Do you have any further comments that you just feel a burning need to speak to?
No, I think we're good. And I'll see you in a month, I guess.